Happy third week of January. We're in the Men of Iron podcast, and you are joining us. We're excited about that. It's me and Ryan Zook in the house. Ryan is somewhat famous, but some days really going to be famous.
Wow, you think so?
I'm thinking for hunting, like
no.
an outdoor
Have you
show.
seen the bucks that I've shot?
I don't know.
let's really dial down those expectations.
More particular. Anyway,
you heard the story about the deer next to my truck, right? Like that's not.
It was a great story.
Those guys aren't getting
If you
famous.
missed that, go back and check out week 1 where Ryan tells us the story of the monster buck he shot week 1 of archery this year. Anyway, hey, we are in this series talking about how 5Fs we can fail. Right. In the 5Fs and how that can be devastating to not only our relationship with God, but it can impact every different area of our lives. And you say, what in the world are the 5Fs? You did this to me last week. Ryan, what are the 5Fs?
Faith, family, friends, fitness, and finances.
That's right. And why are they important? Why do we use the 5Fs in Men of Iron as really a framework? Why do we pick those?
I think it's just like it's a super tangible way to think through issues in your life.
Yeah.
And if you're balanced and thriving in those areas in your life, it's really likely you're going to be who God has called you to be.
Right.
The Bible has a lot to say about all those areas.
Yep.
And when we're doing well in all those areas, we're most likely walking out the life that God's calls us to walk out.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's not about perfection. It's about consistent growth in each one of those 5Fs and balance.
Yeah.
Is what we talk about. And this week, so we've talked about faith, right? Faith being the foundation that sets us up well to succeed in every other of the Fs. So faith, we talked about family last week. This week, we're talking about an interesting one. We're talking about friends.
Yeah.
Why are friends so important to the Christian man's walk?
Yeah.
How would you answer that question?
Dude, fun fact on this before we jump into the answer, like most likely you feel like, not you, Travis, but most likely you in the audience, there are many of you who feel like when it comes to friends, you don't have a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah. The reason I say that is because when we run groups or when we talk to guys that we work with, it's very common for people to be like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess I have friends. Like, I guess I could call somebody.
Yep.
And particularly when we talk about like, God-centered, faithful friends, like that audience gets even smaller.
It's the number one most neglected F.
There you go, man.
That we have.
And we see that, like, just in conversation with guys. Because it's like, well, I got guys I can watch football with, but I'm not sure that they're my friend. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, they're friends, but like a deep, spiritually centered, healthy presence in your life.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of guys that feel like they're killing it in that area.
Right. And I mean, it's just a tough topic to talk through. So why is it so important?
I think it is super important because you need other faithful men around you to hold you accountable for when you screw up. Because we've been talking about a lot about ways that we screw up.
Yeah.
So somebody that can see your life and be like, "Hey, man, like, what are you doing? That's not great." I think it's helpful to have guys that like process life with. Like, hey, I'm dealing with this thing. Like maybe in your marriage, like I got this thing going on. I'm not sure how to handle it. Like somebody that can bring you wisdom, somebody that knows who you are, that can talk about like what you're doing well, what you're not doing well. Yeah. I think friends are great people to do that with. Yeah. It's also just good to have friends around to do things with.
Right. So when have friends made a difference in your life for like, so remember we're talking about like from failure to functioning or failure to balance.
Yeah.
So is there a time in your life where you feel like you were really failing in this area? Man. And then how did you work yourself back to being balanced?
So I get excited about the friends that I have in my life. Like I think I have some pretty solid guys in my life that are good friends of mine. But the only reason I do is because my wife made me.
Right.
So where I was failing is like I didn't have friends, and there was a time in my life a couple years ago, probably I don't know at this point 5, 6, 7 years ago, my wife is like, hey, like you need friends. Like what happened to all those guys you hung out with all the time in college? Like they were really good for you. Why aren't you connected with those guys? And I was like, I don't know. Like I got a lot going on. Like there's stuff. Like in the last week, I talked about how I had a really demanding job and I was away from my wife a lot. Yeah. Like that was in that season where my wife was like, you don't have any friends. I'm like, I barely spend time with you. Like, why am I going to hang out with my friends? Yeah. So my wife, she like booked this cabin And she's like, I want you to call up the four guys that you used to hang out with in college. We all lived in an apartment together.
Yeah.
Once you call up those guys, we're gonna book the cabin. We're gonna pay for the cabin. If they want to put money towards it, that would be helpful.
Right.
But we're gonna invite all those people, those guys and their wives, to go to the cabin and hang out with us. And at that point, it was like, is anybody going to do this? Like, aren't we all really busy? So we called people up. Some people could make it, but some people couldn't. And we've been doing that same trip in March every year after, all because my wife wanted me to have good friends. So this is not like, hey, I saw the problem and I pulled myself out of it. Like, I just did what my wife told me to.
Right. Which is really helpful, honestly.
Sometimes it's a great idea, right?
Yeah, I mean, gosh. And, you know, this isn't like it's okay to steal that idea if you're listening to this. And go do it.
And I can tell you those cabin weekends, always in March for us, it's like oxygen to me, man. Yeah. So like I cannot imagine doing life without that, even though I did for a long time without it.
Yeah.
And it's not even like, sometimes I'll go into the weekend, and we're connected more than just that weekend, but we'll go into the weekend thinking like, I don't know, like, are we gonna have anything to talk about? Like, what are we going to do for the whole weekend? And like, it goes so fast. Yeah. We all end up talking about really crazy things going on in our lives. There's always like a couple of evenings where it's like, man, like, I didn't even know you were going through that. Like, I mean, we've dealt with heavy stuff. And I don't want to get into it all, like, because it's other people's stuff, but like heavy situations that people go through, and we can process it and pray over it and show love and concern for our friends in those weekends. It's really powerful.
Yeah. Well, so and I'll just say this before I ask you the question of like, you know, I think what's so important is it's not just about what you can get out of friendships.
Oh, no. Yeah.
But it's so much more. It's life-giving to know that you can bring something. You can be a listening ear, right? Because just like friendship is difficult for me or for you or for any, like it's difficult for most men that are out there. We don't have real friends that we can talk to about different things or process different things. So it's what we can, the friend that we can be to somebody else, I think is really important, you know? So let me ask you this though, like, what were there any indicators, or like, what was it like when you were failing in that area? Like, how did you know? What are some telltale signs? You're like, no, you know, I talked to somebody, you know, this past week, and I said like, hey, like, I knew we were going to be talking about friends. And so it's been on my mind, but I just asked this guy, I said like, hey, like, who are your friends? Yeah. And he looked at me, he's like, he was an older guy. He's in his 50s. He's like, I don't really have friends. I'm like, oh. I'm like, well, like, who do you hang out with? He's like, I don't know. Like, I have acquaintances, but I don't have friends. But like, how do you recognize that, you know, that you're out of balance in that area?
This is me personally. Yeah. When I was in college living with those guys, it was like a really spiritually important time in my life. And we were all growing in the Lord at like a pretty fast pace together. Yeah. And so we had a lot of conflict that we worked out together. Like we had some real fights that we worked out, but it was really good for us. We all knew it. Like we loved it. So the way that I knew it was out of balance is because I could feel the absence of that in my life. And I could like I just said a little bit ago, like I cannot imagine not having that, because when it gets to like February, I'm like, oh, cabin weekend's coming, man. Like I'm like holding on for cabin weekend. So good. And we all say, like, we all make that joke together. Like, oh man, like since January, I've been like just putting in the hours at work, just waiting to get to this cabin. Yeah. So I think for me, I know it's out of balance because I know what it was like to have good friends. Yeah. And I know what it feels like to be out of connection with them. And I think it's probably similar. Like everybody can probably remember a time when you had a really good connection, and it might not be 6 guys. It might be 1 guy, it might be 2 guys. And you can probably tell when you don't have it. I mean, like when you're talking to a guy and he's like, I don't really have friends. Like, he knows. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like, you know, even as you're talking there, I was thinking about just how friends, when you go through the 5 F's, if I'm not thriving with my family, one of the reasons I feel like I can't go hang out with my friends is because like I'm sacrificing time away from my wife and my kids to go on a hunting trip or to go fishing or whatever I'm going to do. And so in a lot of ways I feel guilty that I, you know, why would I sacrifice that? So I think what's important is, you know, we have to first be thriving in those. You have to at least be in balance to even have the confidence to say to your wife, like, hey, I'm going to hang out with my friends. Because, I mean, some of us, let's be real, we hang out with our friends too much. Oh, yeah.
We talk to some of our friends probably know some things about us or our marriage that they shouldn't know, right? Or that our wife should know, and we should be closer to our wife than we are with our friends. So
it's funny, those guys might actually be acquaintances and not friends.
Yeah.
Because I think friends will be like, hey, what are you doing hanging out with me all the time? Like, how's your wife doing?
Yeah.
Which is like, that's outside your comfort zone, right? Like that feels a little weird.
Yeah.
But sometimes there is a difference there, I think.
Yeah, there's a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so let's just go to this because it sounds like you're a little bit different than me. When I grew up, I didn't have a whole lot of Christian friends.
Yeah.
Right. So when I think about, because I think, like you just said, you can be failing in this F by hanging out with friends and hanging out with the wrong friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like for me in college, man, the last thing on my mind was following the Lord. You know, I mean, I lived in a house with a bunch of football guys. There's 9 of us. And, faith was the furthest thing from our mind, but I was really balanced in the friends area of my life. And it was dangerous, you know, because I did a lot of stupid stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. So, there's this Proverbs that says, walk with the wise and become wise. Yeah. So when it comes to even thinking about, okay, I'm out of balance in this area, how do I get myself back in balance? And how do I be real intentional about what it looks like, who I should be hanging out with to stay balanced?
I think about Proverbs 27:17, which is like our verse, right? But as iron sharpens iron, so one friend sharpens another. Yeah. Like one of the ways you discover who your friends is they sharpening you? And that's in a spiritual sense. Like, are they driving you further to God? Yeah. Those guys are your friends. Right. If you get together with a group of dudes and you're actively being pulled away from God, they're not your friends. They might be dudes you like to hang out with, but they're not your friends. So that's where, like, when you talk about balance, you might have like this mirage of like feeling like you're balanced in your friends, but they're actually just dudes you hang out with. Yeah. So I think about David and Jonathan. Yeah. Because you could look at the Bible and you could say, I don't know, does the Bible say much about friendship? Like, do I really have to have friends? Dude, David and Jonathan have this incredible friendship that sometimes weirds people out. Yeah. It's like, oh, these guys are too close. Like, I don't even know we should be talking about this.
It's true.
But if you look in, it's 1 Samuel 18 is right when David kills Goliath. Actually, David kills Goliath in 17. And in 18, Jonathan and David make a covenant together, right? So how many friends are you making covenants with, Trav?
Yeah, not many.
It's pretty serious. And the Bible actually says that they loved each other like they loved themselves. Right. That's solid friendship. But the thing they had in common is that they were concerned about serving the Lord above anything else. Yeah. So they were extremely loyal to each other. They served each other very well, but ultimately they were concerned about serving the Lord. And they're pushing each other. Yeah. And Jonathan was supposed to be the king, and David, by all rights and circumstances, was actually like competition. Yeah. Like he really, if he would have been doing what the world does, he should have been looking for ways to kill David. Yeah. Which is what his dad was doing. But Jonathan's like, hey man, I'm willing to give up all this. To serve you and what God is doing.
But isn't it interesting? Like, sometimes I don't want to be like I remember when I was young, like, and I was dating my wife, but like, gosh, being around like guys who were concerned about faith and chasing the Lord was almost like boring.
It's like weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, man, no, like I want to go out and like, be able to do what the heck I want to do, And so I guess like how do guys, I don't know, like where do you find those types of friends? Yeah. Where do you go to find those types of friends? And then, gosh, I think it's important to also be able to draw common ground even with the guys that are, like when I think about me, so something like for me, I'll answer my own question. Yeah. Okay, let's just put it out there. Is that like something that changed everything for me when it came to friendships was deciding I was plugged into my local church. Yeah. Right. And, but I decided I was going to serve somewhere. Yeah. And it was stepping into a student ministry environment, right? Where I stepped in as a 6th grade guy's life group leader. Yeah. And what I started why? Because I love the Lord, and I realized there was a whole bunch of kids out there who were struggling with a bunch of ridiculous stuff, and I didn't want them to make the same mistakes that I made. So in a lot of ways, I was serving in a selfish reason because I wanted to be able to give back, if you want to call that selfish, but raise them up so that they could avoid mistakes. But in that, I found some other guys.
Exactly.
who were on a common mission with me, you know, a guy named Dan who and you know, you talk about friendships in the Bible, right? Like Paul and Barnabas, you know, I was the Paul, I feel like in a sense, and Dan was the Barnabas who like took me alongside of him when I started to have a flame burning in me for the Lord. And he started to show me how to harness it, you know, and how to be really effective in helping young middle school guys, right, man, not make stupid decisions and follow the Lord. And praise God for that. But it was interesting. It was because I found something within my local church that I could get excited about, and then other guys had common interests. And then it led from Dan then to having a tribe of men who are like-minded and mission-minded, you know, so it's powerful.
It's funny. I have a really stupid real-world example of this. So I drive a Honda Ridgeline, so don't judge me.
So good.
It's not really a truck, but it does things a truck can do, all right? So when I bought that thing, I thought I was the only person that had one. But once I owned one, I was like, oh man, everybody has a Honda Ridgeline. Like I see them everywhere. Did everybody buy a Ridgeline? Like right after I bought mine? And the concept is like when you own something, you notice other people who own the same thing.
Right.
So your story about getting involved in student ministry, like when you decide, hey, I'm going to put myself in situations where people are taking their faith seriously, whether you did it like selfishly or not.
Yeah.
When you're somewhere where you're like, hey, I want to be doing what God wants me to do, you'll start to notice other people that are doing what God wants them to do.
Yeah.
So you talk about Paul and Barnabas. Barnabas is the dude, I think it's like Acts 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Barnabas is like the whole church is scared of Paul.
Right.
Because he's like his hobby is killing people and killing people that love Jesus.
Right.
And so Paul shows up and is like, hey, I kind of want to teach people about Jesus. The whole church is freaked out. And Barnabas sticks his neck out and says, hey, I'll vouch for this guy.
Yeah.
I want him to come with me on my journey, on my mission, and I'll support him.
Yeah.
So he saw a guy that was like not doing it great, but kind of wanted to go the right direction, took him on, and they end up being a great example of mentorship, of friendship, pushing, like iron sharpening iron.
Yeah. And I think what's good though too is like, okay, when you're on mission together.
Oh yeah.
You know, what starts to happen, and what happened for me anyway was like, I started to, like my friends who weren't believers or who weren't passionate about that mission, like that mission started to take over in my life, and in a lot of ways brought me to where I am today.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because the people who weren't as passionate, like my non-Christian friends, right, it was kind of like I started to lose things to talk. Every time I'm around them now, I want to talk about like, like the cool stuff. And that was valuable. But then my non-Christian friends started to disappear because I was like, in a sense, like not into doing the things that I probably shouldn't have been doing anyway, you know. But then I'm trying to fight to keep my non-Christian friends around because you talked about the Great Commission, you know, and it's like, so I still need to be around and connected to non-believing friends so that I can build relationships with them, care for them. I mean, it's tough, man.
It's tough.
But it's a balance, you know, and figuring it out.
You could probably think through that target, the same thing we talked about last week.
Oh, it's so
like
good.
those believing friends that can sharpen you and push you, keep them close.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you ostracize everybody else.
Yeah.
But it does, like, you kind of measure who's allowed to speak directly into your life.
Right.
By like, how close are they to Jesus, man?
Yeah.
I want the guys that love the Lord and follow him well to speak into my life.
And if you don't have those friends, I think what's interesting is it's awkward to put to seek out good Christian friends.
Yeah, 100%.
Like if you're going to go to church and like, you know, it's awkward to meet people for the first time.
Yep.
It was super awkward for me to say yes walking into a room full of middle schoolers as a grown.
It's like the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you want to talk about uncomfortable, but it took me, I kept showing up because Dan kept saying like, look, man, this is going to be weird. Just keep coming.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as I kept, then, you know, what started to happen? These young guys started to know my name. Other leaders started to know my name, and it started to change everything, you know, and the fan was flamed. So yeah, man, friends.
Guys, we know that like many guys struggle with this. Like it's tough to have good friends, and we want to be a resource for you. So like if you are listening to this and you're like, I don't have friends, how would I even go about finding friends? Reach out to us.
Yeah.
Like get in touch with us, talk to us. We'll see if we can help you out. We'd love to try.
We have a series called A Man's Friends that you can get. It's free. It's online. It's powerful. We also have a man's game plan where we talk specifically about the 5 F's, but we spend some time talking about friendships. But we're on the journey together.
Yep.
Right? Fighting for balance because it's hard to keep balance.
Yeah.
Anyway, listen, we're so glad that you joined us for week 3. Come back week 4. We talked about faith. We talked about family. We talked about friends. Next week, we're talking about
Fitness, man.
Fitness.
Yeah, I'm too lazy to do that
Get
one.
pumped, and we'll see you next week. Hey, thanks for listening to our Men of Iron podcast. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you go to menofiron.org, or you can hit the subscribe button. You can ring the notification bell. That way you don't miss out on any future episodes. But again, thanks for checking out Men of Iron.